Hello, everyone. This is your friendly neighborhood TA Gray. Hello. And here we're gonna be doing some to-do lists today. So I know some folks had a lot of questions, a lot of concerns with it, and it's a really tough assignment. So I kind of wanted to hopefully get most of the questions answered today. If I need help or anything like that, I know we'll be there. But to kind of show that there are different ways of doing the to-do assignment, different ways of going about it, or what do you do when you have this type of assignment or task and you're just like, oh shoot, I don't know what to do. So that's what I'm here to kind of talk about today. And we're going to just use a to-do list assignment as an example. I know I believe he's going to be doing another assignment tomorrow during office hour. So you guys will begin some type of practice at least almost every week with like, hey, how to go about this assignment. Because I know we both know that the MERN stack or JavaScript stack is a really challenging one, like all the other ones. So with that being said, like always, I'm happy to hear your voice. I'm going to try and look at the chat and everything like that. But if you have questions, please come off mute. Any comments, again, the concerns, please come off mute. You can say something. Yeah, so we're going to get on started. So I'm going to, and if I talk too fast, let me also know. I'm trying to be more mindful of it there. So let me start sharing my screen and share. Cool. So I have my lovely, awesome code here, and I have my little janky to-do list. I'll get it pretty later, okay, guys? Don't come for me. But so this is how I started. So let's first start off with when you're going about an assignment like this. You probably have a lot of thoughts running through your mind, like, hey, what's going on? What to really do, or what to really start with. I actually really should have pulled up the learning platform, but please bear with me today to see how about it. So, you're on the learning platform, they tell you, hey, you have this assignment. I'm like, hey, what to do? So in React, a lot of times before you really start off with anything, you want to understand your components. Like, how many components do you really want? How are they going to really be set up, and so on and so forth. So for this example, what I did is pretty simple. I made 2 additional components. I know how original. gray hour 3 to do form and gray hour 3 to do list. That's it. That's what I did. Obviously, yours won't say gray hour 3. It would just say to do form, to do list, etc. But you want to understand, hey, how many components I'm going to have and what are going to be in these components. So remember, your app.js is what's actually showing here on the screen. And when you have app.js, it's here rendering on the screen. They're just swapping out components every single time. So that's what I like to start off with, like, hey, if I go about this project or assignment, how am I going to really set this up, my folder structure? So all this stuff is set up for you, as you know, but you're just adding in your components. So here are my components: to do form and to do list. Cool. In my app.js, typically, not 100% of the time, at least probably for this course, you're probably going to have this app.js as your main point for your state, because it's typically the main parent. Now, when you get into a little bit deeper into the course, we're going to modularize a bit, and this may not be the place that you will have your primary state, but you want to have a place for your primary state so you can pass it down to your children. Because remember, props are passed down from parent to child, top down. Okay, you're using something like Redux or use Reducer, something different, but we're not going to be doing that there. So with that being said, this is where I'm going to have my state. So let me make this a little smaller if I can. Sorry. There we go. So first things first, I have my state at the highest level. remember, a lot of times you're going to get into an assignment and you have to think about the relationship that your components are going to share. So in this case, the app is going to, it's the ultimate parent, I guess you want to say, but then you can create another parent that will house all that state. But for right now, we're just doing it with app.js. And when we're thinking about state, you want to be like, well, what's changing? What do I want to keep track of? In this case, when it comes to to-do list, you want to be able to keep track of your inputs. So I'm going to have a state for my input. I call it task because I get confused a little fast. And if everything says to do, I'm just gonna get confused. And I don't want to confuse y'all. So I just call it task, but you can call it whatever you want, obviously. Just make sure you're being really, really specific. Whether to do item, or title, or to do name, whatever, just make sure you're specific. Because if you have names that are not entirely sure, like what you're doing, sorry, if you don't have like the names, you're gonna get confused. You're not gonna show what you're doing. So I have it as task at task, which represents my to do, which is like my input. Okay. So and I have it as empty strings because I want this to just start off with a clean slate. All right. I don't want anything in there. I don't want the user like seeing it. I just don't want to do it. Right. And then the next piece of state I want to have is a list or an array. I want to be able to change items that's in my list. I'm going to be saving some things, deleting some things, crossing some things out. So I also want to be able to keep track of that. And by default, I wanted to have an empty square bracket. The reason why we put an empty square bracket is that you do not get an error. If you don't put anything in it, or if you put null or anything like that, you actually get an error because it's automatically going to try and loop. And if you don't have anything in there, it's just going to cause an error. Okay. So when you're dealing with lists, try to remember, not 1000% of the time, but most of the time, you want to start off with an empty square brackets, a list, so you don't cause any errors. So here, you're going to set it off with strings, empty quotes, and here's going to be an empty array. Now, I know a student had a question about, well, when to use a curly brackets and then when uses square brackets. So remember, and this actually gets caught up, is very common. So, don't think that it's only with you. Whenever you're doing state, you want to use square brackets. Okay, square brackets right here at the beginning. And then whenever you want to bring in props, like I'm going to show here, you want to use curly brackets. Okay. So that small syntax error can definitely cause major errors. And you're wondering like, wait, I'm passing it down. It's because you use, curly brackets instead of square brackets. So just be mindful of that there. So with that being said, we have our state and then we have our list set up. And I believe that's all we really need to track at this point. Before I move forward, any questions or concerns with that there? Does everyone see where I was coming from? Please let me know in the chat or come off mute. Give me some feedback here. Thanks.
I actually had a question. I'm not sure if you know this, but does JavaScript have like reserved variable names that like you can't use? I think
Yes.
like in Java, there was something like that too.
Yes, it does. I'm trying to think of them right now. Let's actually look them up. I don't know them all.
I think SonarLint will tell you that the actual name, is an old deprecated one. So you might see name as something that like sometimes if you have a linter, which is basically just checking your syntax, or it's kind of a way to check to see if there's going to be any sort of errors. It'll sometimes put like if you have name, it'll put a line through it and it'll insinuate trying to think that you're thinking of calling the old variable of name and showing that it's deprecated. But I think that's one that is
Yep. So in JavaScript, you cannot use these in either ES5 or ES6. which is good to know. So some of the things you already know, but sometimes you forget. So yeah, and then use some here. So good question.
Cool, thank you.
No problem. All right, cool. So it looks like I saw some folks with ones in the chat. Cool. All right. So now we know what our state is going to be, what we're going to be tracking. And so now we're going to just go to the next step. So the next step is like, all right, great. We have our folder structure down, boom. We got our state down, boom. We know that it has to be passed down from parent to child, great. So now we have our components, which is rendering right here on the screen. So here, I made this component and that component. So we're going to start with the form because that makes sense. And I kind of want to just reiterate like this part here. Actually, I'll wait for that part. So for the form, right? I know that I'm going to be receiving props. One way that I remember is that if you want to give someone something, they have to receive it, right? They don't receive it, you know, you can give it, but you got to make sure they receive it. So you're probably like, wait, what? I know, but that's how I remember when it comes to things. I kind of think of things when I start to code, what are real life circumstances that I'll actually really remember these things. So I always remember like PA, it's my sister state, you know, Pennsylvania, parameters, arguments. The parameters are for definition, arguments are for, you know, calling the function. And they're just things that help me remember. So with that being said, you want to give props to your forms, give props to lists, get it, give props. Okay, all right. All right, so we're giving props down. So we want to make sure that they're receiving the props. So just remember that. You have to, in order to receive the props, you got to give props. Okay, I'm gonna stop the props. Anywho, so we're receiving the props here. And we're like, hey, form component, we're gonna use this stuff over here. Cool. So you will set up your form and it's a basic form, gonna have a label, input, button, same old. And some people like to use the input button. I just like to use the regular button. It just makes sense to me. But you can also use the input button. There's no difference. It's no difference. I just like to use it. So yeah. And one of the things that I like to make sure that I have, and mark this down for yourselves, whenever you're using an input, you want to make sure that you have all these things present. First thing, you have your type, text. This tells you if it's going to be, you know, a text input, it's going to be a checkbox, a radio, a date, time, etc. You need to make sure that you have it. Your class name, where in React, if you want a style, you have to use class name. Placeholder is there for the inputs. You can technically not have it and it'll be fine. It's just more user-friendly, obviously. But the most important parts are the names and values. Without name and value, you're not going to be able to do your onChange function. Okay, very, very important. Without onChange, you're not tracking the changes within the input, and therefore that's not going to be saved to state. Okay, so name, value. So whenever you do eTarget.value, if there's no value, how is it going to target it? That's how I remember. And these little things that help me remember what I need. Okay, you don't have to memorize everything, but just make sure you come up with certain, you know, tips and tricks to remember certain things. So, and then the last part is depending on the functionality that you're trying to go about, you're gonna need your event handler. I know that we did an event handler this last week, so hopefully everyone has a good understanding of it. If not, please refer back to Gray Hour 1, which is week 2, excuse me. So here, the onChange is a function, and it takes in an event. The event is what is triggering the type of change that's going on. So the event is going to be like, you know, the click, the typing, so on and so forth, right? And then here's our set task. So we're gonna get to this part, but this is where our state is gonna come. We want to track this. So remember in the app.js here, we said, hey, task is going to be empty. So by default, there's nothing there. If I want something there, like, hey, whatever, it's going to be there. Okay. So we want a clean slate. So we want to make sure that's tracked. Cool. So now we have another event handler. Again, it's another function. And this function is going to take in another function. Can on change function, on submit function, takes in another function. A lot of functions, I know. So here you have your create to do, and we're breaking this to do down. I don't know how in depth that I should go, but at any point, if anyone is losing it, if I'm going too fast, please stop me. But again, I'm just going over the overview of the assignment, of how I'm going to like really break this down. So I know if I want to create something, I know I'm going to have to create a function to do so. When you start getting into database stuff and things of that nature, you know, you're going to have a lot of stuff you don't really have to do as much. Like this part, you're not going to have to do. But since that we don't, and we're saving this stuff into state, we need to have this stuff. So in this case, I want to be able to save the structure of my to-do, and hence why I call it new to-do object over here. And it's going to have a structure of this. I wanted to have an ID, I wanted to have some text, and I wanted to have a completed. These are my keys. These are my values. Keys are to the left, values are to the right. KV. K becomes before V, so key value. Again, what I do to remember these things. So it's going to have a key of ID, key of text, key of completed. Someone may ask, I think they did, is that how do you get an ID? You don't have to do an ID, but if you want to do an ID, I did npm install, leave my package.json. I did npm install and I did UUID. And I imported it, initialized it here, and said, hey, every time I create something, that's going to be a new ID. Any questions or concerns with that part? It's not required. You don't have to do it. But if you want to do it, that's how you would do it. If you want a random ID. Cool. So, so this is how you would do the create. I want to create a new object, and I'm going to call it new to do object, and I want to add it to my list. Some folks may have asked me, how do I add something to a list? Well, remember, we have this something called a spread operator. If you're not entirely sure what a spread operator does, all it does is just gives you a copy of your list or a copy of your object. It's specifically for objects and arrays, okay? Objects and arrays, this spread operator. It says, hey, copy all the contents in this array or object and put it in here. And you know it's for an array because it has these square brackets over here. Okay, we know that is. And I wanted to add it at the end. If you want to add this at the beginning, you can do that. That's fine. You would just put, if you wanted to do this, oopsie. Being on my Mac. And this will also be valid as well. Same thing. You're saying, hey, I want to add it at the front. Hey, add it at the bottom, at the back. Same thing. With that being said, that's how I'm going to create it. And I want to be able to clear out my input after that. So I'm going to just do this functionality right here. I need to sleep. And as you see here, I'm actually going to try and zoom in a little bit. Okay, so here's my new to do. Now an object. I'm adding in that text of sleep, has an ID. That's what this line does right here, my UUID, well, my UUID. And then by default, it's going to be false because I said I want it to be false. Okay, and that is how you create something and display it here on the screen. Because the display is, actually, let me get to that part. So the displaying part, how I got that is is this other component. And I'm doing a map because this is an array and you have to be able to map through arrays. If you guys want me to go through this, please let me know. Please let me know. But this is my map. My iterator is one to do. My iterator is just something where I want each value in my array to have something, and I'm going to call it one to do. This represents each individual object in my array. So this thing over here, I called it new to do. It now represents my one to do. Okay. Let's see there. So that's how I'm displaying it. So that's the create, and that's the read part of it. We create with this function over here, and then we display with our map. If we're looping through an array, and then we have to use dot notation. All right. So that's this part here. So I'm gonna hop out of that there, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about, I'm gonna comment this one out. Don't worry about that one there. So for the view part, like I mentioned, we're looping through here and the delete part of it. I'm not sure how many folks got through this part, but please let me know. I didn't get the last part yet, but the delete part. Whenever you want to view something, delete something, or update something, you need an ID. You need an indicator. Something that says, hey, I want to target you specifically, and we use that through an ID. You're going to do this in different ways. This is one way to do it. I technically showed two ways, but I'll just talk about this one for right now. So with that being said, I'm coming down to my button. I'm going to need another on click. I need to be able to target this particular object in here. Yeah, I need to be able to target this particular object that has this ID. So in my mapping function over here, I need to be able to pass it something. This one to do .id. This is a syntax how it would be. This is actually how you would do it if you were, if you had a database, that would still be, but we always want to take in the E to actually get the event. Without this E, it will not work. If I don't have this over here, and oh, then never mind. Wait, I gotta get back to you on that one. I think I did something else too, but I digress. But I don't know how that happened. Anywho, I'll get back to that one. Anywho, but without, I typically have the E in there. I forgot what circumstances without the E it didn't work, but I'll get back. But I need to really pass in the ID. So with that being said, this ID represents that delete to do, and that's being passed in. So this is my parameter, and this is my argument over here. Remember, parameters are being passed in as a definition of the function, and when calling the function, which I'm calling it right here, I need to pass in the argument. So with that being said, I feel like I've been studying so much lately. So I added this item to my array, and I'm actually, I know I called it select. It's okay. This don't come from me, guys. So now I have all these items in the array. They're all done by false. And if I wanted to delete one of them, because I console logged everything, is this is my ID that I'm targeting over here. This is this line. Console log everything, guys. I do it, I still do it. It's such a great tool to understand the data that you're getting from function to function. So here I'm console logging my ID, and I'm getting it. So that's exactly what's being passed as an argument in my function over here. When it comes to my filtered list, I'm using a filter function because I'm removing an item. I'm altering it in a particular way. As opposed to mapping, I kind of wanted to see some stuff. I believe Will provided a article about when to use filter, when to use map. I think there's another one called reduce. There's quite a few of them. It's just with experience, you know, with it. I always have to refer to documentation. So just letting people know with that there. So I'm using this filter function like, hey, I'm going to take something out. And I have my iterator calling it to do item. So I'm being specific. And I said, hey, this to do item has an ID. I want to grab that. And I want to be able to take this item out that matches this ID. And then I want to be able to give back that list and set it to my state over here. And I have some console logs going on here. This is my filtered list now. This is now the list without that sleep ID there. Please let me know if that makes sense. Does anyone have questions on this part? I think most people got the create and read part. I think the delete functionality gave people some trouble, but let me know in the chat, come off mute. Does this make sense? If you already did this assignment, then I guess it's not for you, which is okay. But hopefully I was able to kind of clarify a few things. Cool.
So does filter like just drop it off the list? Is it just like when you filter the list out, it basically says you want to take this item that's equal to that ID and then root it so that way it's no longer there.
Yeah, so it takes it out. So for filter, it takes it out of the list for you. And I have to see if I can find that article. I would highly suggest reading the documentation when it comes to like when, but in this case, that's why I didn't use mapping, because I don't want to display something. I want to be able to alter my list.
Right, because map is going to iterate through and just produce a for loop. While filter, it sounds like it's going to be like, this is a bad egg. We don't want that egg. And then root it.
Well, let me kind of expand on that. What filter will do is you give it some sort of condition. And so in this case, we have to do item ID does not equal deleted to do ID. What this is doing is this is returning an array of items. So it's going to go through. So just because of our condition right here, it's saying, okay, I want you to go through this entire list.
I get it.
And what I want you to give me back
isn't that object
is all of the items that's not equal to this. We could have done it. And so let's say we had 5 things in there. It's going to now, if there is an ID that matches, then it's going to skip over that, right? Because it's going to check this condition and say, okay, for item 1, does its ID match this deleted to do? No, it doesn't. Okay, cool. We're going to keep that because of our condition right here. Right. And then it's going to go all the way through. And if it finds one that that this is actually true, that the ID matches the deleted ID, it's going to skip that. And so filter returns to us a list or an array. Sorry. It's called a list in Python. So they're kind of synonymous. Yeah. It returns to us an array of the items. So in this case, that do not match. We could have inversed this and said, I want you to just return to me the array, or I really want the item that, if I wanted these to match. So if these had like a double equals or triple equal sign, then all it's going to do is it's going to find the one to do item that does match. And it's going to give us back an array of that one item. That's what filter does, is it will give us back an array based on either all the ones that this is not true, so they aren't the deleted ones, or if we were to flip it, it's just based on what we do here.
So we're not exactly deleting it, we're rather forgetting it, because I'm thinking deleted in like, CRUD functionality, which for people who haven't done full stacks yet, that's different.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We're just making a list that forgets that list.
Yeah, we're basically
deleting it, we're just forgetting it.
Yeah, so what we're doing here is we're getting this list back that doesn't have that item, and then we're saying set to do list, with our new list. And so we're sort of, like you said, we're not deleting, we're just overriding and excluding that item in this case.
Can you use push and pop in JavaScript?
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
so you could
it's
you could
a dot push. And I don't think it's dot pop in JavaScript. But yes, you can do the same thing. You, as long as you have an array,
okay,
if you want to
and
add
that could actually
something,
just go through and delete instead.
yeah, you can do that. They have the same, it's similar, it's just the array class, and they have built-in methodology, just like in Python where you have dot push, dot pop. Same sort of thing, just built-on methods of the array class. If you remember way back when we talked about map, filter, and for each, and I showed you what's going on under the hood, and it said array dot prototype dot, I can't remember what else it said. What that's saying is that's the array class that has access to these different functions. So that's what filter is doing, is it's, you're right, it is not necessarily deleting that, it's just creating a new list that is excluding that, or a new array that's excluding it. And then we're saying, okay, now we want our set to do list to be this new list that doesn't have that item in there, i.e. we're deleting it or forgetting about it. But in an actual database, we'd go in and we would find that, and it will actually do a deletion where we get rid of that. So it's kind of a workaround until we have a database.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for that
Cool. Thank
explanation.
you.
And then Chris asks, could you just set the to-do list with filter? Yes, you can. I think you could just put this whole thing in there. Like it's just, this is what you're referring to, correct?
Yeah, try testing it. I'm not sure. I would assume so, because it's just giving you back, it returns a array. So I would assume so. But let's try it.
And then study some more. See. Yep. Yes, I do it. Yeah. So yeah, you can do it. This is just a little bit more readable. This is why we typically either way is fine. But this way is a little bit more readable. So you're like, hey, what's actually really going on? Cool. So that anyone have any other questions about the delete functionality? Again, a lot of this stuff, when you have your database, you don't have to do it manually. But since we're only using React front end, this is kind of like what Will said, is a workaround. Or if you have storage, stuff like that, storage, local storage, you can use something like that. To incorporate it in lieu of your database. So any questions, does anyone else have questions or concerns with the delete functionality? Anything like that?
I think that's a good point to add in, Gray, is that this is a little bit more challenging because we don't have an actual database and we're sort of just manipulating state right now. What we would do, and what we're going to start doing next week, tomorrow we're introducing MongoDB, but then what we will be doing moving forward is actually being able to grab an item, adjusting it or deleting it, and then it will sort of, then we can still just run our get alls, or we can run whatever we need in order to get it. This is a little bit more of a challenge, and especially this strike through, because it's easier if you can just go in, change a property, and then it just runs. But because we're sort of doing this in memory, sort of in a way that you won't really do it, it does make it much more challenging.
Oh yeah. As you can see here, my to-do is to fix this strike through. I didn't fix it. If anyone was wondering about this is actually an extension. I forgot what it's called. But if you actually just do anything like to do, it'll actually light up. Whether it's camel case, not camel case, whether it's like this, it'll light up, and it kind of just, lights up your code, like, hey, make sure you do this part. So I know to come back to this later. I started it and obviously didn't complete it. So I'm probably gonna just get you guys up to this part while I figure this part out, because it's been such a long time since I've done it. But this is how I went about it. So what Will was saying, that this project is actually a really challenging one, that that it will take going the roundabout way of doing it. This is not how professionally you would do it, because again, we have databases and so on and so forth. So not to use your tools is like, oh man, how am I going to hammer in this nail without a hammer? So it's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna use this brick. I was like, probably like, shouldn't probably use a brick, but hopefully you guys get my analogy. Anywho, so I created this function called handle check, and I had it actually on my on change over here. I actually used something called a checked attribute, and that will check on and off depending on my state. Now, I also want to share this with you all that I tried a few things and they did not work. I don't know why they didn't work, but I'm sharing this with you that if this is a project that you're not, an assignment that you're not getting, it's okay. It's okay. You try and try again. I'm like looking at my functionality. I'm looking at I'm looking up things, looking at the learning platform. I'm doing to make sure like, hey, what am I missing here? Because several things did not work. So with that being said, this is still not working. So this is like my third chance, my third try, well, probably my fourth, that's probably, and everything. And this is a little bit closer, but not yet. And it's basically to show you all that you don't have to have the answer on the first try. You don't. So with that being said, we have about 10 minutes or so. And we can work through this last part, and we can, learn a few things, and I don't mind changing up my code. Or if anyone has questions up to this point, ask them now, or we can work through this part of the to-do list. So anyone have any takers on what we should do for the last like 10 or 15 minutes of office hour?
I vote that we try to fix this portion of your code.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where a lot of people are getting stuck.
Yes, I definitely do agree. Why you, Robert?
In the sense, like I was thinking, like we can pass in the ID if that works and get that to target it, and then change the state or use a ternary operator in there that says if true, like in the for loop. Have two different kinds of styling that it uses.
I think that's already there, right, on line? Yeah, I think on line 18 or
oh yeah, on line number
38 or 37, it does have
37,
that.
38.
Okay, so I guess we're voting to fix this code. All right, guys, we're gonna be learning together. Humbling myself in this moment. So again, this is for those who are trying assignments, even as a TA. Other TAs, it's like, hey, why my code not work? I did 30-minute rule. I think actually, I think it's like I did the 2-hour rule, to be honest with you. And hey, I couldn't figure it out. But I learned a lot of things with it. And the major issue that I had was actually something with the style attribute when I was using a different syntax and storing it as state here. And you just learn why certain things work, why they don't work, and have to look things up. So we can kind of go about that. This is like, again, the third or fourth way that I've tried to get it to work. But again, I'm open to it. This is like my first one. I did a really long if statement over here. I don't know why this doesn't work. It should have worked, but it didn't. But yeah, just kind of to show this is like someone mentioned, like for pseudocode, right? I pseudocode this out. I wanted to make sure like, hey, I wanted my ID to be passed in, and I want that to be checked. So like, for instance, I didn't use the index. I actually used the ID. But that didn't work either. So I was just like, oh man. So we could kind of like start from fresh, or start from the beginning, but we have a handle check function.
I think I have an idea for the next 10 minutes. I think we can probably get this maybe done, but I have sort of an idea of maybe what we could do. Okay. This is just off the top of my head thinking through this. If somebody's already completed this and this doesn't work, you've tried it, let me know. I guess the way I would think about this is we do want to pass in an ID, right? That's going to be important. So we'll want to make sure that we do pass in that value. Perfect. Now, what I'm trying to think of, what are we trying, like, let's from a very basic terms, what are we trying to do, right? We have this array of to-dos. I am wanting to pick out the correct array or the correct object, right?
Mhm.
That I want to change. So I know that in order for me to do that, I want to create and do my filter, and I'm going to filter and get that specific object. Right? So maybe let's just do some pseudocode gray,
Mhm.
and let's just say filter out correct object.
So, I'll just do Spark. So,
We're going to filter out the correct object.
mhm.
Okay. So we know that this is going to give us a list or an array, sorry, that's just going to have the object if it exists. Now, what I also know is I want to keep track of the other stuff, right? I want to be able to, and again, because we're sort of doing this in memory, I've got to kind of do this in line, right? And it's kind of confusing. So what if I actually did another filter, but I inversed it? So I want all the values that do not match, the ones I don't want to edit. And my thought is, if I can grab this filtered object, right, I can go in and basically do an if check and say, I know that this is running if this is checked. And so what I can check is I can say, if it's true, I want to set it to false. Or if it's false, I want to set it to true, right? I'm just going to flip flop that. And I can do a ternary operator inside of my filtered object. Yeah. So once I manipulate that piece of information, that key of completed, all I then have to do is come here. And just like Robert was saying, I just have to push that back into my list that I want to keep track of.
Mm.
So if I push it back in there, now I have this updated list that has the item that I wanted, or I was manipulating, also my other objects. And then lastly, all I have to do is set state for my new updated list. And then it should have all of the values of the objects that weren't the one I manipulated, plus my newly manipulated object. When I do that, what you have on line 37 should take care of it, where it's going to check that key, where if it's true that it is completed, then we're going to have this styling of line through. And if it's not, then we're going to have the styling of none. So what we're going to do is whenever that's clicked, we know that when it's clicked, we're wanting to change specifically that key or that aspect of our object. So now let's kind of build that out. Does that make sense to people? We're going to take this out. We're going to get the other ones. We're going to update this. We're going to add it into here. And then we're going to set state to our newly updated list. Any questions? Does that make sense to people? Am I thinking through that correctly? Okay, we only have 7 minutes, so let's go ahead and try building that out. So let's go ahead and filter. If we're getting that ID, let's go ahead and filter by it and just set it to.
That already.
I don't want to deal with the completed because I think I'm just going to do a ternary operator there.
Okay, no worries.
So let's just go ahead and get that, filter out that object, and maybe we don't fully complete this, but we can deal with that. So basically, we want to have not an if, I want to just do a filter.
Oh, I'm
Right.
sorry.
No, you're
Sorry
fine.
about
I just
that.
want to filter out. Yep. So we'll just say, const filtered item or filtered object or one object.
Okay, I'm gonna say updated list equals.
So, yep. So if we're going to do updated list, let's do the inverse first. Or so let's just say, sorry, let's just say one object. Oh, I want to make sure that it's blatantly obvious.
Okay, so one object
And then
Mhm.
that is going to be equal to that filter. So we're going to say to-do list dot filter. And to-do list is in my state. Yep. We're going to take in to-do item. And then we're going to basically check and say, is that item's ID equal to, so just this guy, what you have on line 17, but the inverse. I want it equal to.
Oh. Da, 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 da. Triple equals.
Yeah.
And this is gonna be check ID.
Checked ID, yeah. So what this is going to do is it's going to give me an array of that object. So I do know that I'm going to have to eventually say, one object position 0, right? That index. So we're going to have to do that, but that's okay for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Now what I want to do is let's just go ahead and console log. Under that one object, let's just go ahead and console log one object and then of index 0.
One object.
Position 0, because that's going to give us back the list. I just want the
Right.
actual aspect itself.
Cool. So I'm gonna just do sleep study. And I'm gonna.
It's
click
only on the
check.
click, right? Yep. Okay, cool. So we know that we can grab this one object and it has this completed key. So now what we can do is within this, we can do some sort of check or some sort of ternary operator, right? That
Mhm.
basically says if one object's one object 0 dot completed, right? Because remember, we have to do the 0. Or we could just say like, we could do another variable that says it's this of 0, like it doesn't matter. That actually might make a little bit more sense. So in this, let's say one object list, just to make it a little bit easier.
Oh, sure.
And then what we're going to do is say one object equals one object to list of position 0.
Fine. This one here. Okay. Oh, boy.
Yeah, well, we're just gonna make a new variable. So let's say const one object.
So you're saying, okay.
So here, this is giving us back a array, right? I just want just the value. Yeah, so let's just say one
Yeah.
object.
I have to
Perfect.
do let like one object equal.
One object list position 0.
Yeah.
And then we won't get an array back. We'll get just the dictionary back or the object back.
Yeah. There's this new thing with Mac where it does not allow you, let's see. Whenever you draw on people's screens, it actually doesn't bracket 0. Cool. So now that makes
Right.
sense.
Now I have that object. So now I can basically do a ternary operator, right? And say, if one object dot completed equals false, then I want to set it to true, else I want to set it to false, right? Because what that's going to do is it's just going to flip. It's going to flip either if it's true, then it's going to set it equal to false. And if it's false, it's going to set it equal to true, right? So we just do a ternary operator here on our one object dot completed.
So if one object, come on.
So you could actually don't even have to say, you could just say one object dot completed. So you don't need the if.
No if.
And then say question mark after that. And then we're going to put false. And then colon true. Now what this is going to do, we don't want that in a string. We want it to be a Boolean.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
So what this is doing is this is saying, ooh, this is a red line. Why?
Expect an assignment or function call instead of a sub expression.
We can look at this, but what this is basically saying is if this is true, then I want to set it equal to false. Or meaning that this is false, I'm going to set it equal to true. So this is us flipping it. We can do an if else if necessary. I'm not quite sure why that's not working.
It's 20 hours.
Yeah. So, and I want to wrap this up. So we're just going to talk in theory. We're going to flip these, right? We're going to use an if else. Then we're also going to have we want to use a filter just like we did here. But it's going to be the inverse where these are not equal to, right? So it's going to give me my array of all my objects that do not equal. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to dot push this new object or this object to this array. So this is going to be a newly updated array. And then I use my set list or whatever we called it, state, and I set that. So now it's this new state, and then your line 37 should handle the rest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Because you would have to still you want to still loop through the same list, we'll do the filter and all that type of good stuff. And then,
yeah, you could just copy basically line,
yeah,
the second part of line 20. Yeah, that, and then just flip the, instead of triple equals, it's the not equals to.
All right, let's see. On the fly, guys.
Yep. And
let's
so once you handle this,
yeah,
and you can flip those back and forth, then all you have to do is push this one object to new list, do set to-do list, new list, and then now your list should be updated. And then your line 37 should handle with that ternary operator, should handle, and it should go back and forth.
cool.
So maybe work on, if you could work on that during class, and then at the end, if we have some time,
Sure,
show your code.
will do. Chris is the last part. Just going down to see job pops. Yep, here we go. So I'll work on this as you guys are working, but I'm gonna stop sharing now. But this is just to show you, you don't have to have the answer in one go. I literally started very late last night after work. And I didn't finish everything. And I tried a few things, didn't work, and so on and so forth. And we collaborated. So just encouraging those who is struggling, I'm not getting these assignments. I don't know what's wrong. You're not dumb, you're not stupid, you're not slow, you're not any of that. This is a challenge. And it's a learning curve at times. So hopefully that encouraged those who are like, oh, I could do that. And like, oh, she was able to show her errors and so on and so forth. You could do the exact same. So I'm learning just like everyone else. So I think that's about it. I'm going to be wrapping up grades hour. Thank you all for joining. If you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach on out. Okay. And the recording is officially over.